This is Talking to Myself, a podcast where I use stories from my life as a way to self-introspect and hopefully make myself better at art and life. Sometimes it's going to be a big stretch, but these are things I think about and talk to myself about all the time. They say crazy people talk to themselves, but I think you're only really truly crazy if you answer back. Right? Right. So for this episode, I'm going to go into a little story from my childhood. I must have been about, I'd say 10, something between 10 and 12. We can say 11. I don't think it actually happened when I was 11. My parents got divorced when I was 10. No, I was only 6. I decided to move in with the other parent when I was 11. This happened before that, so it must have been 10. None of that has anything to do with the story. Okay, so this summer, I was living in a coastal town in North Carolina, and I was being put in this summer program for kids, sort of like a extra school thing. It was not academic, but it was just a social grouping, kind of like babysitting, basically. But they took kids out to the beach, and they did fun activities with them, and tried to keep the kids socializing and safe and off the streets, mostly, during the summer. So for this little thing, like a lot of things at that time of my life, I entered into it not knowing anybody there, because I changed schools quite a lot when I was a kid. Having a recently divorced single parent trying to find a job and keep a job involved a lot of moving. So I would rarely get more than 1 year at a school before we'd move somewhere else for about 5 or 6 years. So this was kind of the same situation. Brought to this daycare center, coastal thing. It was fun activities. It turned out to be a lot of fun, but at the time it was kind of scary. There were a bunch of kids there, I don't know. And for instance, they had this get to know you chant thing where we sat in a circle. We did a clapping rhyme thing where you would say your name is whatever, and then you say something you liked based with this same first letter. So for instance, if your name was Bob and you liked broccoli because you were incredibly ridiculously lame as a kid named Bob, you would say, my name is Bob, clap, 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 and I like broccoli, clap, clap, clap. And the kids would probably think you're a psycho. That was just an example. Okay, so it came around to me. My name's Nathan. I couldn't think of anything that I liked that started with N. Upon later reflection in my years, I should have said ninjas, or nighttime. Lots of things I can think of now start with N. But at the time I couldn't think of anything, and being the rapier wit that I am, and was even at a young age, I said, my name is Nathan, and I like nothing. And the kids continued the rhythm thing, although they did look at me a little strange. That's a behavior I got used to pretty quick, because that was the sort of person I am and was becoming. There was also at this playgroup center thing, a little redheaded girl named Dawn. And I will never forget Dawn, because of what happened later in the story. It's just weird. I don't know her last name. I never learned it. We didn't go by last names. We were kids. You call each other your first name. It's the South, too, so everyone's pretty genial. There were a lot of sideways glances and curiosity and stuff like that with Dawn, mostly on my part. So we're in a bus on our way to the beach, because this is a cheap way for the facility to take us outside and have some playtime and do something fun. It's summertime. It's at the coast. So we're in the bus. I'm sitting in a seat by myself. It was a big enough bus. It was a micro bus, but there were only like 10 kids in the bus. Most of us are in seats by themselves. I'm meandering like crazy, trying to remember exactly what it was like. There was nobody sitting with me. There were some people around. I knew some first names. That was it. I'd known these people 4 hours. And one of the little girls kind of peeks over the seat in front of me and says, hey, do you like Dawn? And as a knee-jerk reaction, because I was terrified of social encounters, which I'm only mildly better at today, and because I was, trying to be tough, manly, I said, no, I don't, which was a lie, because I was kind of into her. as much as a 10-year-old in the mid '80s, early '90s could be. So the little girl that looked disappointed. This wasn't Dawn; it was a friend of hers, I guess. And I suppose word got back to Dawn, and there were no more curious sideways glances. There was no more interaction. And I left the program. I wasn't there for about a month, and I stopped doing it. We didn't move, but something happened, and we couldn't pay for the thing anymore, or something like that. I don't remember. But I always regretted that. This is like 30 years ago, and I still remember regretting that. It shows you how petty I am. But no, it shows you how much of an impact small seeming things can happen when they seem small now, but were big then. If someone thinks something is affecting them largely, it's affecting them largely, whether it actually ends up affecting them or not. Ultimately, the effect you have at the time can be massive, and that kind of lack of confidence and inability to express myself truly for fear of, I don't know, ridicule. I don't know what I thought the girl was going to say if I said yes. Clearly, Dawn was putting forth the query because she was interested, or wanted to know if I was interested at least, which is, the equivalent of passing someone a note that says, do you want to be friends? Check yes, no, or maybe. And I did the equivalent of checking no and handing it back, which was not what I wanted to actually answer. So I was untrue. I was not righteous in my answer. I wasn't honest. And I lied as a knee-jerk reaction to defend myself and my ego. Okay, so there's the personal tragedy for this episode. They're not all going to be tragedy, but this one is not even a tragedy. It's just a little thing that happened. And Dawn, if you knew there's no way in hell you're ever going to hear this, or have any idea, but if by some bizarre miracle in some universe you happen to come across this podcast, I apologize if I hurt your feelings, Dawn. I did not mean to. I didn't mean to hurt mine either. I did both those things. When you're a kid, things like this happen. As an adult, things like this roll off your back. Life is filled with shit like this. This is what life does. It will attack you at every instance. It will stab you in the back, the front, and the sides. You have to be willing to survive this stuff by being true to yourself. But my advice to anyone, if you're in that situation and you have the knee-jerk reaction to lie, think about it for a second. Hold your answer. Don't answer in defensive mode. Don't just immediately say something because you're afraid of the truth. Think about it. Think about what's going to happen if you say the truth, and then just, if you can, say the truth. Okay, so how does this relate back to art? Well, surprisingly quite a bit. All through school, and I went to college for art. I went through a bachelor's program of art at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, which I changed from biology to art near the end of my term because I was failing organic chemistry, and I was losing my motivation. I was close to flunking out of college. My mom gave me an option. She's like, you need to either get your act together, or I'm dragging you out of college and you're going to get a job, and you'll be stuck with that for the rest of your life. I was like, okay, I'll get the degree. But let me switch to something I can actually get the degree in, something I give a shit about. So I did art instead, which is one of the worst reasons to pick up a program for a study is because you have to take something. That's not a great idea. But art was the most important thing to me then, and it's still really important to me now. We'll save the should I go to college for art for another discussion, but the point is, I was indecisive, and my first knee-jerk reaction when I was faced with failing out of college was to give up, because it was the first time in my academic career I'd ever had been challenged. It was the first time I'd ever had any difficulty, really, of any kind. I still think it has something to do with forces outside me, that particular class, because the instructor was basically on the verge of retirement, and he was just looking to get the hell out of there. And I had a lot of internal factors too, because I was lazy. No one's watching over me, so I just screwed off, basically, like kids do. But the knee-jerk reaction, I didn't take it that time. I didn't say, well, it's going to be easier if I just quit school and go to work. Because I've been working my whole life already anyway. I was working and going to school. Like, you mean I can quit one of these things? And it's the one that's stressing me out the most? That would be, knee-jerk reaction says, yes, do that. But it wasn't the honest reaction, because I knew that it wasn't the best answer. It also comes into play if you want to show your art, but you're scared to. You need to get past that impulse, that initial impulse of fear that keeps you from telling people about things you do, or showing them things you do, especially if you think it's not good enough. always try to do the best things you can on your own. I mean, you're going to have influences, embrace them, but always try to do the best you possibly can. But once you are doing that, or you're trying something new and you don't even know if it's good or not, or if you're doing the best you can, you have to show other people. There's no way to tell. You can't get that information without exposing the rest of the world to it. And I'm not saying you should judge your art based on the rest of the world's reaction, but if you're planning on selling it, then their reaction is kind of important because they're going to be the ones buying it. Art is a weird kind of thing, commercially speaking, because it can exist completely free of commercial influence and just be art for art's sake, and that's wonderful. But no one can live like that. You can't do that for a living. If art is something you're not doing for a living, by all means, express yourself to the utmost of your ability. But remember, that knee-jerk reaction, that fear is still going to happen. Even if money's not on the line, even if your livelihood's not on the line, you're going to have things you're afraid to say in your art. You're going to have things you're afraid to depict for whatever reason, cultural reason, upbringing, anything. Maybe you're raised super religious and you want to say something about that, but you feel compelled not to because of your upbringing. You have to decide for yourself, is it more important that I say this thing, or is it more important that I just keep my reluctance and comfort? So anyway, this is how I talk to myself. And now you are all privy to how crazy I actually am. Not certifiable, by the way. I want to point that out. I am not looking to be put away. I don't actually have long, meaningful conversations with myself. I just think a lot. I'm just very introspective. It's easy when you're quiet and you were raised an only child and you never had a ton of friends. So this is my version of therapy. Because where I'm from, you don't... When I was raised in the era I was raised in, the place I was raised, therapy was something that rich people thought they needed and didn't. And it's like going to the... we didn't even go to the medical doctor if we had an issue. If you had a broken limb, you could probably get away with it socially going to the doctor, but if you went to the doctor with a cold, you're just a little bitch, basically, to put it in modern parlance. That was an unhealthy attitude, and I'm glad I don't live that way anymore. But even now, emotional stuff and mental problems are still have that stigma, so I'm trying to get out of that too. But this was my version of therapy. I've been doing this for years, talking to myself, basically, internally. Not always out loud. But just thinking about introspection, soul searching, they used to call it. If you believe in souls. We're not going to talk about that. Anyway, that's what this podcast is about. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to try to relate it back to art each time because I'm really focused on art and people trying to make art if they want to. You don't have to feel like you can, you just have to want to. If you have something to say, and I can possibly help you say it, then I want to do that. Because people have done that for me, and I really appreciate what they've done. So, I'll be talking to myself again soon. Maybe you'll hear it.